Hi, I am Abby Haksima. I am a Virginia and Indiana DI alum, and I was a challenge master at TVNC where I was studying at North Texas in documentary film production in the media arts department there. I have also been on the photography team at Global Finals for 10 years. I took the last 2 years off. And I was active in the Georgia affiliate, but we folded in the spring, and this was planned pre-COVID. But we also are active, my husband and I are also active in the Florida DI program as well. What I currently do is I'm a film professor at Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, Georgia, and I'm located in Savannah, Georgia. I specialize in documentary film, and I specifically work as a producer and sound mixer on set. And so that's just a little bit about me and kind of what I wanted to do tonight, because filmmaking is a very big ocean that you can step into, and there's so many different ways that you can approach filmmaking, and this can be very overwhelming. So I really wanted to just kind of focus on giving you guys or making you aware of resources and different editing softwares, and based on what's free, what might be best for different devices that you're using at home, and then additional resources you can send your teams to when they want to learn about specific techniques as it relates to filmmaking. So if you have questions as we go, please put them in the chat, and we'll be happy to kind of stop and answer those. So I kind of wanted to start tonight by focusing on what are the different resources out there, and how can you access them, and how can your teams access them as well. And so the beautiful thing is that this is a very visual medium, and YouTube has certainly helped bring filmmaking to the masses. And everybody is carrying a professional camera most smartphones, thank you. Most smartphones have 4K cameras in them nowadays. And so you're walking around with a pretty powerful tool, and the kids, you'd be surprised how much, and I'm sure some of you already know what they can do with their phones. So this is something I think that the kids will very easily pick up. You just need to kind of point them in the right direction on how to maximize the tools that you already have access to. So I'm not really going to talk about cameras outside of smartphones or sound equipment outside of smartphones. That is an entirely different conversation, and I'm happy to kind of address those if needed at the end. But so some of the big resources that I wanted to make y'all aware of, one is called Into Film. And this is actually a resource for kids in the UK. And this has a lot of free tutorials and guides and roadmaps for different kinds of filmmaking. And if your students are actually really interested in film study, or studying different films or learning about the filmmaking process, they actually have a lot of reading guides and discussion guides that you can kind of pair with films. But if you go underneath their resources tab, they actually go much more in depth. And they even have within here, they do have roadmaps for smartphone filmmaking, for making documentary, for making stop motion. And then they also have a lot of really cool history and tutorial. And this is specifically designed for kids, if we were to translate to the US from first grade through high school. It just really kind of depends on what film is age appropriate. And I will point out, so this is from Man on the Move. This is Georges Méliès. It's a French filmmaker. This is silent films. Would be really great films to share with the kids, because everybody in the silent era was still figuring out what filmmaking could be and what it was. And so you see a lot of really cool experimentation. So that might be something to kind of show them, just in terms of like, look, we're all learning this together, and so was everybody else only 100 years earlier. Some of the ones that I tend to send my students to, one is Film Skills. This is actually a paid service, but they actually post a lot of content and tutorials on YouTube, specifically like how to light a scene or how to maximize your microphone space. But they also have courses that students can do, and this is geared more towards high school and college. This is not K through 7th grade friendly unless you have a more advanced student. But these have in-depth tutorials, and they're typically working with much bigger technology. But if you have students who have access to that or they get excited and they want something more in-depth, Film Skills is a great resource. But that's paid. You pay like I think it's like $10 a month. But 2 free resources, and these ones you would want because they're Vimeo Field School is kind of like YouTube. So if you've never heard of Vimeo, it is exactly like YouTube, but this is where professionals tend to post their portfolios, demo reels. You find a lot of animation on this site, and they also have a blog called Vimeo Video School. And within here, they have different tutorials. So like this one is how to make your own time lapse. And then they go into, they have more advanced stuff like website design, but they do go into, how to screen record on a mobile and a desktop, and they'll walk you through this process. This is free. You can just come in here, look for, if the kids are looking for something specific, they may have the tutorial. And again, a lot of these there's not a lot of YouTube influencers or people with YouTube pages that are really designing filmmaking towards kids, or I couldn't find very many. So a lot of these are going to be geared towards older audiences. So you may want to preview content before kids watch if you're concerned about content. But most of these on Vimeo, I haven't seen anything concerning. I just want to put a warning on there because they don't have warning labels like they do on YouTube. And then another great resource, this is called No Film School. And we're going to pull up a guide from them a little bit later, but this has all kinds of questions, and this gets very tech heavy. So again, this is more for advanced learners who are diving deep into specifics, but these have great tutorials and articles about different kinds of situations in filmmaking. But for our younger students, I would kind of use Into Film and Vimeo Video School at our middle school, high school, they'll probably be able to dive into Film Skills and No Film School. There's some articles that I wanted to specifically share with you. One is the best mobile filmmaking gear. So when you are filmmaking, you do want to consider additional ways you can use your phone to get different effects. And this article from Premium Beat talks about resources that you can purchase, but also talks about how you should hold and manipulate the camera. And, they're going to show you, in this one, they're showing you a gimbal, which is what you're attaching the phone to, so you can get kind of a smoother shot than if you were going handheld. There are alternatives where the kids can make these tools. I have students who make versions of these out of PVC pipe. And they go to Lowe's and they make their own rigs for their cameras. So that is out there. This is showing you a professional product you can purchase, but there are tutorials on how to build these at home. So if the kids want to build their own, because you don't want to pay $100 for a rig, you want to make something out of PVC or another material at Lowe's, you can do that, and there are tutorials out there for that. But they do want to research, or I would recommend researching different ways in which to manipulate how to use the phones to their best advantage. The No Film School, another one I wanted to go back to No Film School. They actually have a tutorial here that they've collected all of the articles that have to do with smartphone filmmaking. And you can find access to those articles, and it just keeps going, and you can use their search function, but this just takes you to a bunch of starting tools. And then The New York Times actually had a really great article a couple years ago that is talking about just simple things you can do to improve filmmaking. And this is something I would encourage sharing with the students as well. Okay, so this is a really cool resource. I don't know how many of you are aware of Lynda. So Lynda used to be Ask Lynda many years ago, but Lynda is basically a tutorial website. And what this is they've got tutorials for literally anything you can think of. Filmmaking, how to use Microsoft Word, how to use PowerPoint, how to use many different kinds of editing software. And this is a paid service. However, most public libraries, and I went and did a search, Frisco Public Library has access. You can, if you have a library card, and I think other public libraries in Texas will have this as a resource, but using your public library card, you can get access to lynda.com. And so if someone wanted to learn motion graphics, because they want to make an explosion or fire, there are tutorials for specific software available on this site. So this is something I would look at. This is an incredible resource, not just for like DI, but for anything that you might want to learn or your kids might want to learn. And again, you can access this for free, most likely through a public library. And sometimes universities and schools will pay for a subscription to this, but a lot of people are going through budget cuts right now, so I'm not sure, like our university ended our subscription to Lynda, but I can still access it through the Georgia Public Library system. But this is a great place to get tutorials on video editing, and the kids can kind of search for what exactly it is that they want. The other thing, so I'm going to talk about a couple books that are about filmmaking. And one of the things I wanted to also make you aware of through your public library system or through your university, your local university library, is something called interlibrary loan. And this is where if you don't want to buy a book, but your local library doesn't have access to the book and they don't have a digital copy of it, you can request via interlibrary loan to have the book mailed to that library, and you can pick it up. They'll get it from another library in the system, and then they'll come and give it to you. And oftentimes, because you're getting it via interlibrary loan, you get it for a longer checkout period. And the reason I'm bringing that up is there's a couple different books out there that are very approachable for filmmaking for younger audiences. And one of the ones that I taught a middle school filmmaking course, and we used filmmaking for teens. And then one that I was looking at for this summer for classes, Write, Shoot, Edit. But these are different resources and books that kind of go into what to think about when you're filmmaking, you know, what checklists, things that you might want to do. A lot of this stuff you can find through blogs online, but if you kind of wanted a resource that the team can pass around and look at and read, these are kind of great places to dive into. And again, you can get these most likely for free through the interlibrary loan system, through your public library. All of these are also available on Amazon. Okay, so let's talk editing though, because I think that's what we mainly wanted to focus on. And I'm mainly going to, some of the ones that I'm going to spend a little more time on are the ones that I'm more familiar with and what I use with my students. But I am going to try and highlight software that's friendly for PC and software that's friendly for Mac, and then ones that are friendly specifically for the phone and iPad or tablet device that your students may be using at home. Before we move on, do we have any questions about those previous resources? I see the stuff about the articles have kind of been answered.
Yeah, I think we've been keeping up pretty well.
All right. Okay. So I am going to try and let you know if something is a paid for app or if it's free. This is one that we recommended to our students when we had to go remote in the spring. So our students normally are using nice cameras, and they got completely cut off from all of their equipment. And we were really worried that was going to happen this semester. And one of the first things that we looked at was an app called Filmic Pro. And what this does, this is an app for Android and Apple, and it allows you to take manual control of the camera that is in your smartphone, and it allows you to manipulate the image in ways that the automatic functions that you find within your smartphone limit you by, because the smartphone designers assume that we are not smart and we do not know how to manipulate video to do what we want it to do. So they try and simplify it, and they try and give us filters to make us happy, but ultimately it doesn't give you a lot of control that I would want my students to have when they're working with their cameras. So this gives some of that control back. This is for more advanced filmmaking. So this might be something that's really good for middle school or high school age group. And I'm going to talk about some stuff for elementary students as well. But if the students are wanting to get more in depth and really learn about aperture and ISO and shutter speed, this is a great app to do that. There are additional in-app purchases, but most likely they wouldn't need to use those beyond the base purchase. And they have an in-depth tutorial. I'm not going to play it here, but on how the app works. And again, it's something you can download straight to the smartphone, and it allows you to control the camera much better, and allows you to monitor your audio levels as well. Oops. Oh, sorry, don't want it to play. Okay, another free tool that's out there. So for your students who like to write, and those that like to write screenplays, and they like to write theatrical plays, they might like writing commercials. Caltex is a free screenwriting software that has format templates for film, for broadcast, and for theatrical play. And if you have students who are theatrical plays, and if you have students who are interested in VR and games, they also have a template in here for that as well. This is free. You can have up to 3 scripts in the free version. There is a paid version of the screenwriting software, but most likely you do not need to use it. And they do have pretty good tutorials on the website on how to use this software. And the paid version does allow you to do things like storyboard, but again, they can do storyboarding on a piece of paper if that's a process that they're working with. If you're looking for something even more simple, you can get a plugin for your Chrome called Me Script. And this is a plugin that goes into the Google Word, or not Word, Google Docs, that brings in script writing format. We use Caltex at my school. There's professional screenwriting software that's all paid, and I'm not going to bring those ones up because they're a pretty penny. Okay, so editing software. So there's actually a lot of open source editing software. So screenwriting for younger kids. I would probably stick with Google or look at word processing that doesn't have a lot of extra bells and whistles. They could do Caltex. It's actually very simple. You do have to create an account. You do have to share your email. So if that's something you're not wanting them to do, then you might not want them to use Caltex. But you could play around with it. I think most kids would pick it up fairly easy. I would encourage them to look at tutorials on how to format, but no one's going to look at their format. So if they come up with their own way of writing, ultimately it doesn't matter. They're not getting a grade on that. Okay, so free editing software. There's a ton of open source software out there. Some of it is easier to use than others. Some of it are stepping stones into the higher end professional software. I have used, of the ones on this page, I've only used iMovie and Avid Media Composer. But I am going to talk a little bit about these different software. So if you're using a PC, or if your team is mainly using PC, it probably already comes with Movie Maker. And they also have an online version, which is Movie Maker Online. And this is native software for the PC. It has basic editing functions where you can bring in the video, you can cut and paste clips together, you can add audio tracks. It's not going to offer a lot of advanced options. So certain techniques may not be available. So if you're wanting to layer multiple audio tracks, so if you wanted to have dialogue, music, sound effect, it may not be able to handle that in the design. So Movie Maker is for PC. If you're using Apple products, you are most likely, you have access to it. Comes on your phone, it comes on the iPad, and it comes on the desktop iMovie. And this is, so you can use this between all three of the different platforms within Apple. It also is limiting in some of the functions and the features. I find that we use this software for middle school when we're teaching in workshops, for after school programs, when we have it available, and the kids pick it up pretty quickly. Like and it's intuitive. A lot of this software is very intuitive, and just playing around with it, they'll pick it up. So Lightworks is a software that you download to your computer. This is an open source editing software. And that's actually the graphic that's in the background. I have not personally used this one, so I can't really tell you if it's clunky or not, but you do need to have a good internet connection. So if you're using an Apple or PC, the iMovie and Movie Maker, you don't need to be connected to the internet. So if internet connection is a concern at home or wherever the team is working, having access to an editing software that you can just have stored on the device is probably preferable. And that brings me to Avid Media Composer. This is a stepping stone for the professional editing software Avid. And Lightworks is a part of Avid. It's another branch of Avid. And this one requires you to be connected to the internet the entire time you are editing. It has limited functions, basic functions for editing, but if the students are wanting to work towards professional editing software, this is the stepping stone for that. But again, you have to have good internet. HitFilm Express and Shotcut are also online-based editing services that are free. They're also open source. So what open source is thus anyone can come in and edit the code. And they're basically sharing how the software creates and sharing how they alter and enhance and change the software. Shotcut has more advanced resources than iMovie, Movie Maker, or Avid Media Composer. And I'm sorry, I'm throwing all these softwares at you, and I know this can be a little overwhelming. But these are kind of the main ones that exist. Out there, you're going to find probably more forum support for Movie Maker, iMovie, and Avid Media Composer. Okay, if your students are really interested in the professional software, or some schools, I know I have a friend who teaches, he's in Fort Worth. I want to say he teaches at Richardson. I can't remember, but his students have access to the Adobe Creative Cloud. And they have accounts with Adobe. So depending on what school your student is at, they may actually have access at school to this software, or they may have access remotely to some of this software at home. And every single software on here is cross-platform. So Adobe Creative Cloud is for Mac and it is for PC. So I actually work on a Mac, and then I go teach my students on a PC, and then they go work at another lab that's on a Mac. So they have to consistently switch platforms. And all of these ones are cross-platform. In terms of the free software that's cross-platform, Lightworks, Hit Film Express, Shotcut, and Avid Media Composer are compatible with both computers. So Adobe Creative Cloud has Premiere Pro, and they have another one for the phone called Premiere Rush, and I'm going to talk about that one a little bit later. So Premiere Pro so the Adobe Creative Cloud also has sound editing, it has Photoshop, it has a bunch of other software as well. This is a paid for software if you don't have access to it through school. And the subscription, an educational subscription, is $29.99 a month. So I would first check and see if your school, if the student can get an account via school. You can individually license software, so you can actually get it cheaper than $29.99. But if you want the entire Creative Suite, which most likely you don't need, they're going to charge that higher rate. Some schools may have access to Final Cut 10, which is Apple only. This is an advanced version of iMovie. So it is, iMovie is essentially a stepping stone for this software. I used it a long time ago. I haven't used it fairly recently because I need to go cross-platform where I teach. We're an Adobe school. Another software where you can actually, this one's also free, and this is cross-platform, DaVinci Resolve has some basic editing you can download. This is also a professional editing platform. They have additional plugins and color grading and additional apps that cost money that allow you to do some really cool things, but this is a great software to start off in. And they have some really good tutorials. My students tend to come in from high school knowing DaVinci Resolve, and before they get to some of the other software, because it is something that you can download. And then the last one is Avid. This is the most complicated software. It is the industry standard editing software. Your school most likely will not have access to this unless it's a university, or the parent or team manager is using it as a relationship to their job. And this is subscription based, just like Adobe CC. And they also have an audio version called Pro Tools, which is fantastic. These are great software, but it's slightly more expensive. So these are the paid versions that are out there. If your teams are interested in animation, there are some great free, and these ones are great for elementary. We did a summer camp here a couple years ago where we had kindergartners were using Stop Motion Studio, and they had a walkthrough, and then they were doing it all by themselves. Like they didn't need any help. So Stop Motion Studio, this is, there's a free version and there's a paid version. And the free version allows you, I think, to have up to 3 projects. It's a very basic stop motion thing that you would use on a tablet or phone. So I'm going to play this video here, and I'm not going to play all of it. And it's going to be a little jittery. I apologize. Okay, so so this has limitless kind of options in terms of animation. Professionals use this all the way down to, as I said, kindergartners. It's very easy to pick up and use in kind of different ways. And there's a lot of different support and tutorials that are available. And I actually didn't include those in this PowerPoint, so I will send those to Catherine to share on how to basically use this particular software. And the one thing with a lot of these platforms, with the exception of Caltex and Adobe and Avid and DaVinci, is the project is saved to a specific account. So it stays with that specific account. So you would need to share account information among the team. So if someone's working at home and then they want to send, they animated a scene and then they want to send it to someone else, they're going to have to share the account login information. With Stop Motion Studio, though, it's saving to the phone. So the photos that they're building the video from are saved specifically to the phone. So you won't be able to share from one device to the next without copying all the photos and sharing it. And that's kind of file management, essentially, for video editing. And so there's the free version of this, and this is again for Android, Apple, iPad, and there's a paid version of it that gives you more options where you can replace the background. And then another one is OSnap. And this one is they have a free version of this and a paid version. It's similar to Stop Motion Studio. It's just a different provider. And this is something also that younger kids can easily pick up and use. So before I talk about Adobe, I do want to talk quickly about everyone's phone has a camera option on here. And within that, you do have your video option. And then once you've shot something, you can, when you go into your photos and video, I don't normally shoot video on my phone, but you can kind of come in here and you can do some basic editing and recording. What you cannot do, or what you're limited by, is cutting clips together. So if you've shot two different videos and you want to bring them together, this is why you need an editing software, because you need the software to allow you to take one video and then cut it and put it next to the other video. So if you're doing everything on the phone, one thing, so you can get iMovie if it's iPhone. I think you can get Studio, Movie Maker Studio on the phone as well for Android. Adobe Premiere Rush is a scaled version of the professional Premiere editing software that you can put specifically onto the phone. You would pay $9.99 per month, and it allows you to log into 2 accounts at the same time. So you can be logged into 2 different devices on Adobe. And this works with iPad and with the phone. And it basically kind of makes it easy so you can just edit from specifically the phone device. So this is friendly Android and Apple. Okay, and then iMovie is also on the iPad and the iPhone. I've used this with, as I said earlier, with middle school students to kind of edit, and they have basic effects within here. And this is something that kind of is downloadable on your phone. And those are kind of the main resources that are out there. There are more editing software that exists. I just didn't want to include 20 different editing software for you guys, because that could be a little overwhelming. And I know this is a lot that I've kind of thrown at you. But those are the ones that when the pandemic hit, we all created a Facebook group teaching film and media in the pandemic. How do you teach hands-on work, essentially, when you have to be at home? And we put together a crowdsourced list of editing software. And these were the main ones that people were really excited about or were confident in having their students use at home. But in Texas, you all have a lot of resources of individuals and expertise that you can encourage your students to reach out to. One, of course, is the UNT Media Arts Department. They are a massive film program. They have over 900 majors, very, very talented faculty and students there. And, I would encourage students, if they have questions, to maybe reach out to the students in the Media Arts Department for additional help as needed. You all also have the Dallas Film Society. They actually run summer film camps for kids. And so they might be someone y'all can reach out to if the teams have questions and they need additional support. If you're in the Fort Worth area, the Lone Star Film Society also has, they've been doing programming and filmmaking for kids for several years, and they are also a great resource. And then, of course, Women in Film in Dallas is also a great place where you can find some very friendly faces to ask questions. So if you want to direct your students to local professionals, those are great places to start to talk either via Zoom or on the phone or via email to ask about their filmmaking practices. So that is essentially kind of what I wanted to share with y'all, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. If you have more in-depth questions about filmmaking or about editing platforms, please let me know. I didn't want it to be a tutorial on each platform because that would have taken hours to do.
This is really exactly what I asked Abby if she would be willing to do. One other thing that we sort of talked about is maybe some terms or, sort of standard processes that we can lean kids towards doing some research on so that they know what they're even talking about when they get into editing software, that they know what those things mean. Do you have some resources on that, or some, maybe even just some commentary?
So I'll start there, but I see a question about what editing platform would you recommend for third graders? I think they would be able to pick up on Movie Maker and iMovie. They're the most basic editing software that you can get. It may take a little bit to play around with, but I am constantly impressed by how quickly these kids pick up the software. They pick it up much faster than we do. Okay, so stages of filmmaking or terms that are helpful. So one of the things that we kind of stress with our students, there's 4 different stages of filmmaking. First is the development process. And so that's ideation. That's coming up with an idea and researching. These are all things our kids are familiar with when they're doing DI, when they're coming up with their original concept. So some of the things we think about in the development process is my idea feasible? Can I actually pull this off with the resources that I have? And then it's also researching the topics and figuring out if I'm making a documentary, can I talk to these people? Once you feel like you have it, you're like, okay, I can make this idea. I think I have what I need and I know enough about it. Then I go into a stage called pre-production. And in pre-production, this is where we storyboard. So typically one of the things you want to think about in filmmaking is, what is the exact story I'm trying to tell? What is the beginning, the middle, and an end? Same thing that we do in solving a challenge or writing a skit. We apply that to filmmaking. So once we have that idea, then we have to think about, well, what are the shots? What do I need for my storyboard? So I make up images to figure out what I need to film in order to communicate the story that I want. I make a list of, I need to think about my mise en scène, which is props, costumes, what are the locations that I want to film at? Do I need to build a set at home out of cardboard or whatever it is? Am I, if I'm making an animated or stop motion village, what are the things I need to build that? And then you make plans for it. And once you have all the plans created and you've cast people, then you go into the production process. And that's when we do all of the filming and the recording. And one thing that we see in documentary is we're in this stage of filming and post-production, which is the editing at the same time, because we're filming, checking what we got, editing it together, figuring out what we're missing, and then we go back and film those missing pieces. So again, the main processes are development, pre-production, production, and post, which is our editing everything together. And in what I see in my film students, some of the areas that I try and encourage them to spend time in is development and pre-production, because if the time is spent there in terms of production, because in our industry, it's very expensive to film. One day of filming can cost $50,000, depending on the kind of project you're in. So if you're going to be putting a lot of resources for filming, you want to make sure that all your ducks are in a row. Okay, what if some students have iPhones and some have Androids? Can you do iMovie and Movie Maker together? Those two softwares are not friendly with each other because they are different platforms. That's where I might talk with the school, see if the school first has access to Adobe, because then both kids can access Adobe at home through school accounts. And you can basically, the students would want to research something called file management and how to organize and store files. Because if you're filming on one phone and one computer, you can't just share the edit file to the other computer. You actually have to send everything that you filmed plus the file that you're editing from to the other device that they're working from. Everyone has to be working off of the same files saved on their computers. Otherwise, you'll have issues editing. So those two are not compatible. There are creative ways in which I could see you making it work, where if that's the situation and you don't have access to Premiere, there are ways you can make that work. You just might not be able to edit. They can't edit at the same time, essentially. Or, you know, some might have to edit sections of the skit or the film or the presentation.
So are you saying, can I ask a little bit more on that? So
Yeah.
Are you saying that, so, you know, maybe some scenes are being shot by, you know, one or two kids working together on the iPhone and editing using iMovie. And then another couple of kids are doing different scenes on an Android device. Once they have their own sort of edited entities, films, then can those two go to one or the other platform as an MP4 or whatever, and then be combined?
Yes. So what we see with our students, sometimes they will edit a scene and then they'll share it with another student, and then that student will do additional work and they'll import that in and they might add stuff. That's a very clunky way to edit. And in terms of professionally, that's inviting a lot of issues, but I don't envision students at this level having to really worry about the really bigger issues that can happen. Just be prepared that it can be stressful getting it all together.
Right.
Because you're basically kind of creating additional steps in the process.
And how do you mesh sound? Is there?
So sound editing. So within like iMovie, you can actually, the cool thing is I can record a voiceover right onto I have a laptop. So I can record a voiceover using the microphone in my computer. And then I can it allows you to drag audio files. Most editing software, I'm gonna jump back. So I don't think I have a picture of an editing timeline. But so you can kind of see here on this image, and I'm actually gonna delete this picture real quick. So this is in Lightworks, or is this is Lightworks or Hit Film Express. But these are audio files, these different tracks down here. And you can see one is got the music symbol. So this is a song, and then we have voiceover. And then it looks like these are sound effects. So these are called layers. And these allow you to stack audio files on top of each other. So if you wanted music and then someone to be talking, you would be able to control that. And within the editing software, you're able to control the volume of each of these different tracks. In iMovie, I think you're limited to 3 tracks of audio. So those are the limitations of the free software, is they're not going to allow you to have unlimited audio tracks underneath the video file, if that makes sense.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you recommend that 1 or 2 students be in charge of video editing? So I'll kind of just talk about the camp. One of the things we did at camp, not everybody likes editing. It is a tedious, thankless job that is incredibly fun. I thoroughly enjoy it, but not everybody does. So this might be something to let the kids kind of experiment with and see which ones kind of lean more towards that process. In camps, we typically don't have more than 2 kids sit at a computer together. Because once you have more than 2 people around the computer, there's less work for people to do. And then it becomes, people's attention goes elsewhere. So we typically at camp will rotate. We let the kids edit 30 minutes and then we swap out new editors. They come in, watch what the other kids did and let the others edit, but some of the kids just don't enjoy it. So I'll leave it up to the team to figure out what they would want to do there. But at camp, we typically don't have more than 2 at a time editing. But like I said, we rotated them out after 30 minutes so someone else could come in and learn about and practice editing.
This makes me think of structure teams who, at the beginning of the season, everybody tries out the cutting the balsa wood and the, intricate putting the glue on just right and all of those things. And it pretty well shakes out that there's, 1 or 2 kids who have the patience and the stamina and, all of that to be able to actually be the builders. Same thing with, structured teams with the people who put the weights on, it's not necessarily the same couple of kids who built the structure. So no matter what challenge your team has done in the past, you've probably had to, think about each of the team members sort of working to their strengths and compensating for each other's weaknesses. And that would be the same, I think, in this unique year too.
And so I'm throwing into the chat. So that first link I sent is not a good link. I typed the wrong thing. But freesound.org are free sound effects that students can access. Free Music Archive is a Creative Commons based platform for musicians to post and share music under the creative license. So if you don't know what Creative Commons is, it's a way in which artists can share copyright and they can kind of tell you how you can use their music and what you can and cannot do with them. And so there's an entire category that falls under Creative Commons where you can pull music with the permission of the artist, as long as you give attribution, and you can pretty much do whatever you want to the music. But you have to look at each individual artist's expectations on how you use their music, because some of them are like, you can't use sync. So if you're sync music is when you take a song and you sync it to a video, or you make a music video. So that's essentially, if the artist says no sync, you can't do that, then you can't pull that song to edit with video. Freesound.org is sound effects. And then if students are looking for footage to practice, if they, they can film stuff on their phones and use that. But Perlinger Archives is a public domain archive of government and home videos that have been shared to this archive. There's some really cool and bizarre government videos from the 1950s on there. Like really they made a video about that. But these are free, anyone can use them. And it's a great resource that I send my students to when they need archival material for a project that they're making.
That's a really good one. That, in some of the challenges might really feed into the kind of research that teams would want to do. That's awesome. Any other questions from anybody? We're coming up pretty close to the hour. I would love to do any words of advice for teams of 7 that are separated for the foreseeable future. Oh.
Yeah, so we are constantly thinking about that. Our seniors have to make a film, and we can't have a film as a large crew. And how do we do that? And how do we do that safely and remotely? So one of the things that we've really looked at with our students at kind of the university level is we really look at roles, and what are people most interested in doing in terms of tasks. And you know, so 2 or 3 kids might be really interested in filming, and if that's the case, I would encourage them to think about how they can tell stories that can take place in different locations that can be easily filmed with by themselves. If the rest of the team can't be there, what can they do with that? You know, what are the different genres or styles of filmmaking? I would really encourage looking at that. So a style of filmmaking is, animation, it is film noir, it is comedy, and what are the techniques and techniques and expectations with that genre that are associated with, or that style, because they may get some really good inspiration. And I will also look up, I think we have a resource at the university level that lists filmmakers who are doing work remotely, and what that looks like. And I'll see if I can get that list and share that with TV and CDI. And it basically is filmmakers and how they're making films remotely by themselves, and how they're filming in one place and then passing the story on to someone else. But I would look at what roles, someone might be interested in filming, someone can be editing, normally those are the roles. We have a DP, we have a sound person. So one thing to research is Foley artist. This is the person who makes all the sound effects. And WALL-E. So if you go onto YouTube, there's a fantastic behind the scenes video on WALL-E and how the Foley artists at Disney make the sound effects for the movie. There's also obviously the writer and the director. If you're in project outreach, one of the things in documentary that we have a role for is called the impact producer. And that, if you're spending this time making this for DI and you're making essentially what's called a documentary, you may want to also consider, how can I get this film seen outside of DI? And how might I connect that with my communities and the specific target audiences? So depending on the challenge that they're doing, there are real life jobs that they can associate with within the team. And storytelling, that's something that can be done over Zoom chat. But some of the more technical stuff, that's figuring out who wants to film this part, who wants to edit this part, and stuff like that. How long does it normally take to make a video with sound for 5 minutes? It depends. Some of my students will tell you that you can do it in an hour, and I will sit there and cringe, because if you're striving for production quality, it's going to take more time. A film shoot for professionals with a script, if you have a Hollywood feature, is anywhere from 86 pages to 120 pages of screenplay. Each page equates 1 minute of screen time, roughly. And on an independent, low budget film set, you can expect to film 3 to 5 pages per day. So you could film a 5-minute story in one day, but it depends on how organized and how prepared the team is. What takes more time is the editing. So the editing of it, depending on if you get a lot of takes, if you're making a fiction film and you get a lot of takes, or versions of a shot, and then you have to cut them all together, that can take as little as a weekend. It can take several weeks. In documentary for a short film, I've spent 2 years on an edit. That's excessive, and don't expect your kids to do that. But it can take as much time as you want it, depending on how you want it to look.
And the scoring,
Oh, yeah.
is going to take into account. I mean, DI in general is always going to reward the teams where it is very definitively kid done, and where your creative thought processes and elements of surprise and that sort of thing over professional video production. However, this year that does play part of it. So, you wouldn't want to leave the editing to the last week. And I think the process that Abby laid out, where you spend some time on ideation or figuring out, what's our basic storyline, what do we want to do, and what do we want to include, who are our characters, that kind of thing. Then doing that storyboard that moves into specifically what kinds of shots. And before you can make the shots, you have to have process, costumes, the set, if there's going to be a set, all of those things considered. That's going to take a lot of time. The filming probably needs to, is probably could take one day, and then you realize, oh my gosh, we forgot this and we forgot that, and you start to edit it together and you realize, right? So
yeah.
And then the post-production is all that, putting it together, making sure that it doesn't go bah, 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 and that the sound works. And so, all of those pieces and parts need to be done by the kids, and, facilitated by the team manager. But I mean, this is going to be, in many respects, more arduous than having practices out in the garage with, popcorn after, in my opinion, this year. So I want to applaud all of you for taking the plunge.
One thing I will say, and I tell this to my students, at the end of the day, you can have an amateur filmmaker tell an Oscar-worthy film, because it comes down to story. It doesn't matter what technology you used. Did you tell a good story, and did it make people feel something? So I think regardless of the resources and tools that individual teams are going to have, it comes down to the story that the kids are telling. And is it clearly communicated to the appraisers and to everybody else? And one thing I did forget to talk about was actually when you said scoring, I was thinking of music. So for any students who are musically inclined, that is another role that you can explore, is, original, because I know as it's not Side Trip anymore. It's Team Choice Element.
Team Choice Element.
With Team Choice Element, we see a lot of music performances. And for those teams that's one of their strengths, there's different ways you can adapt what you would normally do in a tournament season. You can still translate many of those team choice elements into the virtual space.
Okay, so we have one more question, and then I think we'll kind of wrap up here. Well, now I have several questions. So we can honor everyone's time here. So Abby, do you want to take, I think one of the questions there was about, whether they should compete this year or hold off. And I think everybody's got the same kind of deadlines, right? So you're kind of like thrown in with sort of everybody else's situation as well. And then that last question that you see there about the video.
Okay, so for younger kids, I think they can definitely tackle this. It's just, how does it get broken down to them? And how as the team manager, do you walk through, starting with the big picture can be overwhelming. I find with my students, I try and break stuff down, and then we build as we go. so that we're building towards this bigger thing at the end. So rather than thinking about here's the end result, okay, well, we need a story. Let's figure out what our story is. Okay, we got our story. Okay, how do we want the people to see our story? What kind of cost, go through that process of just break it down into small pieces. And that's what we do in film anyways, is we try and break things down at a time so that when it does come to that day where we have to come together and film, all the little pieces are sitting on the table and we just kind of put them together. What is the best way to make a video with phone or camera like Canon? I think, honestly, it depends. When you start introducing the camera, you're now talking about media management, storage, and memory devices and additional stuff. I think if the kids are ready for that, I think they can handle it. Phone may be the easiest option because you don't have to buy anything. Most people already have this at home. So if you're going to work with like a Canon, one of the things that you'll want to research, and I didn't really talk about that, is DSLR filmmaking. And I'm going to put that in the chat. And there's a different process for using those tools before you get to editing. And that's kind of a different conversation. But I definitely think middle schoolers and high schoolers can easily pick up a Canon. And that's what I do in the summer workshops. We make a film in a week with middle schoolers and we're using DSLRs. So it's definitely doable. They just need to research media management and file storage and making sure you get the footage from the camera to the computer device and how you are storing and saving. So if you don't have a laptop at home or a desktop, you will have a very hard time editing what you shot on a Canon or on a DSLR on a tablet or a phone device. You do need to have a desktop or a laptop.
And for the couple of people who are talking about, very young kids, I do want to plug the fact that on Monday night, December 7th, starting at 7 p.m., is when we're going to break down the challenge for the Rising Star Challenge for this year. And so I'm really glad that we had this session in advance of that for our Rising Star team managers to be able to reference. But we can talk about some of that, some ideas. I have a couple of handouts that I've used for years with Rising Stars that I think won't be different translating this to film, and we can talk about some of those things on Monday night. So I urge you, if you're in the Rising Star kindergarten, first, second grade, go to the TVNC DI website, register, go to the calendar tab, find Monday the 7th, and go ahead and RSVP that you want to be part of that training. And then you'll get a confirmation email with the Zoom and login, just like you did for this tonight.
There's a question about, and I don't know the answer because I have not looked at the challenge rules this year. But
yeah, Margaret, you had answered the question before about like video, the software and the hardware, and is that included in the budget?
And my my initial response is those are always things that have been cost exempt in the past, including, the jigs and the, Abby was talking about, making some sort of a tripod-y kind of thing out of PVC pipe, that the tools, unless it is something that is in the production itself, tools used outside of that should not be part of your expense report. But there are specific rules of the road this year that talk about many, many aspects of this virtual year. And so I would urge everyone to, look there for specific answers. And as regional training director, I should probably pore over that
Yeah.
rules of the road and get a little bit more. We may even want to do a rules of the road overview via Zoom at some
I'm
point.
sure we will. And it's like, I think, well, obviously rules of the road is going to trump anything that we say about
Exactly.
you know, whether you, and there are a ton of rules of the road this year that have to do with editing and virtual and all that other kind of stuff. So make sure, if you do nothing else, right, team managers, make sure that you look at rules of the road, because there's all kinds of crazy things in this crazy year that you're going to want to make sure that you know about.
That's right.
So I think we're good. I think I'm going to stop recording. If you guys have other questions, you can you've got Abby's email address there, and then you can also email TVNCDI, and we can forward that on to her. But I think it looks like everybody had a really good time. We really appreciated, Abby, the work that you've put into this. I think
Absolutely.
Really our team managers.
Mhm.
All right, and thanks everybody for attending.